My friends and I decided to visit a haunted attraction that the county set up near the outskirts of town. It opened every October and had three main features: a haunted house, a corn maze, and a trail through the nearby woods. It sat right by the tree line, which made the whole area look suitably spooky. The people I went with were my buddies, Ryan, Jake, and Ben. That's just his nickname, not his real name. We started with the haunted house first. It was surprisingly well done and had a few moments that genuinely startled us. After finishing there, we headed straight for the corn maze. At first, the maze wasn't that exciting. It was mostly just us walking through tight turns, surrounded by tall corn. But before long, the scares started. A man dressed like a creepy scarecrow suddenly jumped out from the corn and screamed, making all of us yell and scatter. He started chasing us, and even though we knew he was just a performer, that natural panic kicked in. When something runs at you, your instincts take over. I was the last one in the group, and the scarecrow was right behind me. Through all the chaos and running, I lost track of everyone. We had all gone in different directions. Luckily, I managed to lose the guy dressed as the scarecrow and ended up back on one of the paths between the corn rows. That's when things got weird. I started calling out for my friends, shouting their names and listening for them, but no one answered. I didn't even see or hear any other visitors around. It was like I was the only one left in the maze. I figured I might as well keep walking and finish it alone. After wandering for what felt like 20 minutes, I heard movement in the corn just ahead of me. I slowed down, trying to move quietly, hoping it was another guest or maybe another actor. But then something suddenly reached out from the corn and grabbed my wrist. The grip was tight, so tight that it actually hurt. I yelled, "Stop, you're hurting me completely," shocked that someone in a haunted maze would grab me that hard. The person didn't let go right away. Instead, they tried pulling me into the corn. I couldn't see who it was, just a gloved hand and a black coat sleeve. I managed to yank myself free and stumbled back as the figure stepped out onto the path. He was wearing a thick black winter jacket, dark jeans, and a solid black face mask. There was no clear costume theme, he just looked wrong. I shouted at him, "What is your problem? You actually hurt me." But he didn't respond. He started running toward me. I took off, immediately sprinting through the corn and yelling, "I'm reporting you." I didn't look back. After running straight through the field for a few minutes, instead of following the marked trails, I finally came out near the edge of the maze. I found one of the staff members near the exit and told him what happened. I explained that an actor had grabbed me too hard and that my wrist was sore. The employee looked a bit confused and said he wasn't sure who was wearing that costume, but he would check on it. I thanked him and pulled out my phone. I had a missed call from Jake. When I called him back, he said that they had tried to find me after everyone got separated, but eventually gave up and went to the haunted trail through the woods. I told them I'd meet them there and hung up. I walked toward the entrance of the trail, where Halloween music and sound effects played through speakers hidden in the trees. Once I stepped onto the path, it felt like I was completely alone, except for my friends somewhere ahead. As I hurried down the trail, I froze. Standing right in the middle of the path was that same man, the one in the black coat and mask. He didn't hesitate for even a second. The moment he saw me, he broke into a full sprint straight toward me. I turned and ran into the woods, shouting, "I'm calling the cops," hoping that would scare him off, even though I wasn't really calling anyone. I ran deeper and deeper into the forest until I couldn't hear him anymore. I finally sat down on the root of a tree to catch my breath, trying to figure out what just happened. It hit me. Had that same guy followed me all the way from the corn maze to the haunted trail? Before I could think much longer, I heard footsteps coming from behind me. Right at that exact moment, my phone started ringing. I silenced it instantly, but by then the footsteps had stopped. I slowly pushed myself up from the tree root, barely breathing. When I was 9 years old, my parents finally let me go trick-or-treating without them for the first time. I went with my best friend at the time, Tommy, who was also 9. We were told to be back home by 9 o'clock at the latest. I remember it was already getting close to that time, but we were still out collecting candy. Trick-or-treating in our neighborhood wasn't great since the houses were spaced far apart, which meant a lot of walking for not much candy. Eventually we came to a house that sat on a corner, separated from the others by a tall line of bushes. We rang the doorbell like usual. I still remember everything that happened next clearly, for reasons that will make sense soon. An older man opened the door, maybe in his mid-50s. He had thinning gray hair and a mustache. He started talking to us, asking what our costumes were, but spoke in a tone like we were little kids instead of 9-year-olds. Then he asked if we were with anyone, looking surprised when we said we weren't with our parents. He opened the door wider, revealing a sort of obstacle course he had built in his living room using large cardboard boxes and Halloween decorations. It actually looked pretty cool, and he told us that if we wanted candy, we had to crawl through the tunnel and make it to the other end. Tommy and I looked at each other. It sounded fun, so we agreed. The man told us to go ahead and come inside. But as he said it, he wasn't looking at us. He was looking outside, and then he slowly closed the door behind us. I went into the tunnel first, with Tommy crawling right behind me. It was dark inside, lit only by faint orange Halloween lights scattered around. There were fake spider webs, plastic bugs, and other decorations inside. The tunnel was actually bigger and more detailed than we expected, and it took a while to find our way through. When we finally reached the end, we came out into a small room, also dimly lit with orange lights. There was a handwritten note taped to the wall, pointing toward a door that said, "Candy down there." Tommy opened the door, and it led to a staircase, going down into a basement. There was a faint orange glow coming from below. The man was nowhere to be seen. We hesitated, but then started walking down the steps. When we reached the bottom, we realized the basement was completely EMPTY. Before we could even say anything, the door at the top slam-edged shut. We both ran back up and tried to open it, but it was locked. We didn't know what to do except start crying and calling for help. But then we stopped because we heard the doorbell ringing upstairs. It rang again and again. We pressed our ears to the basement door and heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by shouting 2 men yelling at each other. Then, suddenly, the basement door unlocked and opened. A man and a woman stood there. The woman rushed over, hugged us, and told us to follow them out. We ran with them through the living room. The older man who had lured us inside was standing in the corner next to his cardboard setup, not saying a word. The woman's husband yelled at him, calling him a sick man as we hurried out the front door. The couple took us to their home across the street. The husband called the police while his wife stayed with us, asking what the man had said to get us inside. They told us they had seen us enter his house and felt something was not right, which is why they went over. When the police arrived, they searched the man's home and found enough evidence to arrest him immediately. At 9 years old, I didn't understand how serious everything really was. Looking back now, I'm grateful that the couple across the street acted so quickly. That Halloween changed everything for me. It has been my least favorite holiday ever since. I live alone in a small 2-bedroom house. Last Halloween, something ODD happened that still confuses me a little. I've never really been into Halloween. I don't decorate or throw parties, and horror movies aren't really my thing. I usually just treat it like any other day. Still, I always keep some candy around in case neighborhood kids come by to trick or treat. My area is usually quiet, and I might get around 10 kids total throughout the evening. Last year was about the same. I got home from work, and not long after, kids started coming around for candy. The first few groups showed up sometime around 5:30 or 6 p.m. I mostly stayed in the living room watching TV, getting up every now and then when the doorbell rang. Everything was normal. By around 8 or 9 p.m., things had slowed down. It seemed like most of the kids were done for the night. That's when the doorbell rang, again. I assumed it was just one last trick-or-treater, so I got up and walked to the door. But when I looked outside, there was nobody there. The porch light was on and the street was quiet. I figured maybe some kids had rung the bell and run off, so I went back to the living room and didn't think much about it. About half an hour later, I heard a loud, steady knocking on the door. It wasn't just a few quick knocks, it went on for about 10 or 15 seconds straight. I got up right away, but by the time I reached the door, the knocking had stopped. I opened the door and looked outside again, but once more no one was there. This time, I stepped out and looked around my yard and down the street. Everything was still and empty TY. At that point, I just assumed it was some kids trying to play a Halloween prank. It was strange, but I didn't see or hear anything else for the rest of the night. Eventually, I went to bed and forgot about it. The next day was November 1st, and it was a completely normal work day. That night, though, around 10 p.m., I heard knocking again. This time, it definitely wasn't a Halloween thing anymore, which made it even weirder. The knocking sounded just like before LOD and persistent. I walked toward the door, but as soon as I got close, it stopped. I looked out the window first, but the porch was empty again. I stepped outside, checked the yard, and even walked a few steps down the driveway. Nothing, no movement, no people, no sound. So I went back inside, locked the door, and tried to brush it off. Nothing else happened that night. Then the next evening, it started again. It was a little later this time, and I was sitting in the living room when I heard that same heavy knocking on the front door. I decided not to move at first, just to see how long it would last. It went on for a good 30 seconds before I finally got up and hurried to the door. But just like before, the moment I got close, it stopped. I opened the door quickly and stepped out to look around. The porch was EMPTY again, but this time I thought I caught a glimpse of someone running down the street. It was too dark and too quick to tell for sure. I couldn't make out who it was or even be certain I really saw someone. After that, I went back inside and stayed up a bit longer, but the knocking didn't happen again. The next night came and went quietly, and ever since then, nothing strange has happened. I've assumed it was probably just some neighbor's kids pulling a prank for a few nights in a row. Though, to be honest, doing it after Halloween for 3 consecutive nights makes it a little unsettling. During my junior year of college, at the age of 21, I had an unsettling experience on Halloween night. For context, I'm female and was attending a large university with a sprawling student body. I shared an off-campus apartment with my roommate. That Halloween, a few friends and I got invited to a costume party at a classmate's place. He was known for throwing lively bashes earlier that semester, so we expected a fun night. We kicked things off at a nearby pub, which was buzzing with costumed revelers, creating a chaotic and festive vibe. After some time there, we decided to head to the house party, a short 10-minute stroll from the pub and close to my apartment. When we arrived, the house was already packed with familiar faces, and the crowd kept growing. At one point, my friend Lila pulled me aside and subtly nodded toward a guy across the room. He had dark hair, and his costume was vague, hard to pin down. Lila looked nervous and said she wanted to leave because that guy was there. When I asked why, she said he gave her BAD vibes and had creeped her out before, though she didn't elaborate. She insisted on leaving before he spotted her and slipped out. I chose to stay longer since our other friends were still around. About 30 minutes later, the same guy approached me. I didn't know him, but assumed he was a student at our university. He introduced himself and started chatting casually. Nothing he said was overtly strange, but something about his demeanor felt OFF. After a few minutes, I said I was going to get another drink and tried to walk away, but he trailed after me still talking. The house was now so crowded it was hard to move around, and I was starting to feel uneasy. Just then, one of my friends, Emma, came up and mentioned that a few people were heading to another party at a guy named Ethan's place. Ethan was part of our friend group, though I'd never been to his house. Relieved for an excuse, I said I'd join them. Emma said she'd round up the others and meet me before we left, then vanished into the crowd. I should have followed her right away, but I didn't. It was too packed, and I couldn't spot anyone else I knew. Meanwhile, the guy was still next to me, still chatting. Then he asked if I wanted to go to his place instead. I firmly said no, explaining I was heading to Ethan's house. He claimed he knew where Ethan lived and said he was going there too. That made me uneasy, but I asked for the address anyway and entered it into my phone. Then I said I needed to use the bathroom before leaving, mostly to get some space from him. I went upstairs, used the restroom, and when I came out, he was gone. Unfortunately, so were my friends. I searched the house but couldn't find anyone I knew. In the end, I decided to head to the address the guy had given me. My phone showed it was about a 15-minute walk. I set out alone. The streets were quiet now, and as I walked, the surroundings started feeling less familiar. When I reached the street where the address was supposed to be, something felt wrong. The houses were old and rundown, not like typical student housing. I double-checked my phone, the address matched. The house itself was dark, with no lights on and no sounds of a party. I approached the front steps, intending to knock, but before I could, the door swung open. A man stood there, dressed all in black with the SKI mask on. I figured it might just be a Halloween costume, but it was still creepy. I didn't recognize him. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to come inside. That's when it hit me. I was definitely at the wrong house. The interior was completely dark. I stepped back and said I must have the wrong address. Then, from the shadows behind him, another man appeared, the same guy from the party. He told me to come in, but I said I knew this wasn't Ethan's house. He admitted it was his place, not Ethan's. I turned and started walking away, immediately. He followed me outside, still talking, and when he kept getting closer, I broke into a run. I could hear him chasing after me, so I sprinted down the street, cut through someone's yard, and darted into their backyard. I kept running through another property until I reached the next street over. When I stopped, he was gone. I caught my breath, pulled out my phone, and started calling my friends. After a few tries, one of them answered. I explained what had happened, and one of the guys from Ethan's place came to pick me up. Thankfully, I didn't run into that man again while waiting. Later that night, when I reunited with my friends, I told them everything. I never saw that guy again. After that, I guess Lila had been right about him all along.